Have you ever stopped to think about how many times we ignore important warnings in life? Let me tell you something surprising. The biggest warnings we get don't come from governments, doctors, or experts. They come from the Bible. Yes, those ancient words carry warnings that touch on the most sensitive areas of our existence. Our choices, our relationships, and even our spiritual health. And each of these warnings has real consequences, both for today and for the future. Imagine for a moment the laziness that leads to failure, the anger that destroys bonds, the pride that isolates, or even the words that, without realizing it, we use to build or destroy. Have you ever felt like you could avoid so much pain and frustration if you had paid more attention to some of these signs? It may sound heavy, but the truth is that the Bible doesn't want to control you. It wants to set you free. Each teaching is a key to peace, to success, and to a harvest of good things in life. And there's more. These teachings are not just for the super religious or for those who think they have everything under control. These warnings are for all of us who face temptations, insecurities, and fears. Because contrary to what many people think, the Bible speaks of the real world. It alerts us to the impact of our actions and offers practical solutions to problems we all face. Believe me, when you find out what each of these warnings means and why they were given, you begin to see your life in a completely new way. You don't want to lose this knowledge that can transform everything, so it stays until the end. Let's discover these powerful teachings together and understand why ignoring them may be the biggest mistake we make. When it comes to warnings, the Bible does not skimp on guidelines for life. It is like a signpost on a winding road, indicating dangers, guiding paths, and warning about the consequences of our choices. Adam and Eve, for example, were warned about the forbidden fruit, but they chose to ignore that warning. And what came next was an entire world affected by that disobedience. Often we ignore small warnings in our daily lives. The doctor warns about the risks of a sedentary lifestyle, and yet we choose the sofa. The Bible, with clear and direct warnings, acts in a similar way. God presents us with choices and warns us about the consequences of each of them. It's like that advice that our grandparents gave us, and sometime later we realized that they were right. These warnings are much more than mere words in an old book. Every biblical care carries the weight of God's experience in guiding and protecting His children. When we are told to avoid pride, for example, it is not just a suggestion of humility. It is a way to cultivate faith and love in our relationships. Ignoring pride can result in isolation, in an empty spiritual life filled with harvests of resentment. God, like a loving Father, knows that the path of pride leads to the fall, and so He offers us the path of humility. By embracing these teachings, we are planting seeds that will bear good fruit and prevent many stumbling blocks. Think of the warnings as a lighthouse on the high seas. He does not stop the storm, but shows the safe way, keeping sailors away from the rocks. In Proverbs, we find warnings that avoid future problems such as laziness, which is pointed out as a source of failure. If we plant laziness, the harvest will be one of scarcity. These words are an invitation to action, to overcome self-indulgence and hard work, encouraging us to become diligent in our spiritual and practical life. A Christian spirit, like a field that needs to be cultivated, depends on dedication to bear fruit. The Bible goes further to warn us about the importance of prayer as a protective shield for life. Many of us try to face challenges with our strength, forgetting that faith is our best refuge. God reminds us, through the prophets and apostles, that He is a call away. It is necessary to recognize that prayer strengthens the spirit, rooting in us a peace that keeps us firm, regardless of the trials. When we pray, we transform our journey into a dialogue with God, where we find the strength and discernment to overcome daily temptations and difficulties. These biblical warnings, in addition to protecting us, are a compass that points to the true north, life with God. Each instruction, each piece of advice, acts as a warning to avoid pitfalls and bring us closer to the Creator. Living in line with these teachings is like cultivating fertile soil where love and forgiveness are the seeds that will yield a bountiful harvest of peace and joy. To ignore these signs is to open doors to consequences, which can affect both the present life and eternity. And it is in this path of attention and spiritual zeal that we find the key to a journey of faith and purpose. The Bible is very clear in condemning laziness, treating it as one of the greatest enemies of personal and spiritual growth. Solomon in Proverbs 10:4-5 gives a direct warning. The slothful hand is poor, but the hand of the diligent is rich. He that gathereth in the summer is a wise son, but he that sleepeth in the harvest is a son that shames. This verse talks about the importance of constant work and preparation, showing that the time to act is now, not later. Often we fall into the temptation of postponing what needs to be done, whether in professional life, in relationships, or even in faith, and we end up reaping only the fruits of stagnation. It is like uncultivated land that only bears thorns. Without effort, the fruits do not come. This vision of Solomon goes far beyond physical labor. It represents a mindset of diligence, where every daily action is a seed for the future. In Proverbs 6:6-8, the wise man also encourages us to learn from the ants. Go to the ant, O sluggard, look at its ways, and be wise. She, having no chief, no official, no ruler, prepares her bread in the summer and gathers her food in the time of harvest. This is a lesson in individual responsibility. Each one has the task of being active, investing in their own journey and pursuing a life full of purpose. Anyone who has seen the effort of ants realizes how essential it is to plan and act, whether in the spiritual field or in the daily routine. Letting oneself be carried away by laziness is also a sign of spiritual negligence. The Christian life requires effort, and as Ecclesiastes 9:10 says, "Whatever comes into your hand to do, do it according to your strength." This means that we must give ourselves fully to our responsibilities without reservation. When we are diligent in caring for our faith, we are building a solid foundation that is resistant to storms. And it is at this point that the Christian spirit is different, because he acts with faith, knowing that every effort counts. If faith is the fuel, action is the engine that moves it forward, bringing a rich harvest of wisdom and peace. It is essential to understand that laziness is a silent theft, which prevents us from experiencing the true potential of an active and productive life. At Proverbs 24:30-34, Solomon relates that he passed by a sluggard's field and observed the result. Everything was full of thorns, its surface covered with nettles, and the stone wall in ruins. This is the portrait of the life of those who let laziness rule. It is like a mind without discipline, which allows worries and temptations to dominate, instead of cultivating the spirit with actions that reflect love and obedience to God. The message against laziness is an invitation to transformation, a call to replace stagnation with an effort that bears eternal fruit. In Galatians 6:9, Paul encourages us, "And let us not grow weary in doing good, for in due season we shall reap if we do not lose heart." This encouragement to perseverance reveals that the Christian's path is one of diligence and faith. Those who give themselves to work in a spirit of prayer and dedication are always planting seeds that, at the right time, will produce an abundant harvest of love, peace, and gratitude. Laziness then dissolves in the face of the commitment to the harvest that God promises to those who persist. Prayer is the foundation that sustains the spiritual life, an act of connection with God that goes beyond words. Luke 18:1 has a straightforward teaching. Men should always pray and not faint. Jesus knew that the world would bring us challenges, and that without a firm foundation of prayer, we would be easily shaken. Praying is not a mere repetition of words, but a sincere conversation where we place our fears, hopes, and challenges before God. Prayer strengthens the spirit and brings peace to the mind, allowing the Christian to face each obstacle with faith and perseverance, knowing that God walks by his side. Paul in 1 Thessalonians 5:17 invites persistence. Pray without ceasing. This instruction is a call to cultivate a life of constant prayer, which permeates every moment of our day. It is not just about setting aside specific minutes, but about transforming each action into an act of communion with God. Imagine being in a turbulent day, where worries come up one after another. Instead of letting these worries get you down, praying can be the key to turning anxiety into serenity, doubt into confidence. Prayer is thus the oxygen of the spiritual life, renewing strength even in the most difficult situations. Prayerlessness represents a spirit of independence, of someone trying to figure it all out on his own. In James 4:8, we find a promise: "Draw near to God, and He will draw near to you." This verse reminds us that by seeking God's presence, we receive the support we need to face the most challenging moments. When we decide to rely on our own strength, we often feel drained and directionless. But by praying, we make room for God to guide us and give us the strength we lack. Prayer brings discernment, revealing the best ways and freeing us from temptations. Another crucial aspect of prayer is the power it wields over internal conflicts, such as the struggle against pride and temptation. In Matthew 26:41, Jesus warns, "Watch and pray lest you enter into temptation. Indeed, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." Jesus reminds us that the spirit may be willing, but without prayer, we are vulnerable. In times of temptation, be it of any kind, pride, selfishness, anger, prayer works as a shield that protects the heart and mind. This practice, which requires humility, allows us to face each challenge with renewed faith. Prayer is not just a cry for help, it is also an act of gratitude, an expression of love and recognition. In Philippians 4:6-7, Paul teaches us, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything let your requests be made known to God by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your heart and your mind." This is the effect of prayer. It relieves anxiety, brings clarity, and transforms our outlook on life. And so, with grateful and strengthened hearts, prayer leads us to the next step in our faith journey. Anger is a powerful emotion, and when left unchecked, it can be a disaster for the spirit and relationships. At Matthew 5:22, Jesus earnestly warns us, "But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother without cause will be in danger of judgment." He does not tell us to ignore our emotions, but rather to be careful, for the effect of anger can be devastating. When we allow anger to dominate our actions and words, we can end up deeply hurting those around us. Often words spoken in moments of fury leave lasting marks, creating walls where there should be bridges of love and forgiveness. Language, when not well directed, is one of the most destructive instruments we have. James 3:6 makes a direct comparison, saying, "The tongue also is a fire, it is a world of wickedness. It has the power to create and destroy, to bless and curse." Words spoken without reflection can hurt deeply, and in many cases, the impact is difficult to reverse. Imagine the tongue as a hammer. With care, it builds, but used carelessly, it destroys. We are called to use our words for edification, remembering that God Himself instructs us to speak with wisdom and love. Mastering the tongue is an act of humility and spiritual control. At Proverbs 15:1, we are reminded, "A mild answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger." Responding calmly, even in provocative situations, is a demonstration of self-control and inner peace. This does not mean giving in or being complacent about injustice, but rather keeping the peace even in the midst of tensions. In practice, this can be achieved by pausing before responding, reflecting on the impact of our words, and asking God for wisdom to act with meekness and love. The Bible also teaches us about the importance of forgiveness as a response to anger. In Ephesians 4:26-27, Paul counsels, "Be angry and do not sin. Let not the sun go down on your anger, neither give place to the devil." This verse warns us not to harbor grudges, for pent-up anger is an open door to destructive action. Forgiveness is like an antidote, dissolving the poison of anger before it does more damage. By choosing to forgive, we are allowing love to prevail, healing not only our hearts, but also those who have wronged us. The power of words even extends to the way we see ourselves and speak of ourselves. In Proverbs 18:21, we find an important lesson. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and he who loves it will eat of its fruit. When we use our tongues to bless and edify, we are planting seeds of life that produce a harvest of peace, love, and faith. Our mission is to learn to express our spirit through words, allowing them to be a reflection of God's goodness and wisdom, always remembering that what we sow, we will one day reap. The search for God is the greatest calling anyone can receive. Isaiah 55:6-7 invites us, seek the Lord while he may be found, call upon him while he is near. Let the wicked forsake his way, and the wicked man his thoughts, and turn to the Lord, and he will have mercy on him. This is a direct invitation which requires urgency. Often pride prevents us from pursuing this connection, as we think we can live in our own strength. But this search is the antidote to the spiritual emptiness that many feel. It is a path of surrender, where each step brings us closer to an unconditional love and true peace, which only God can offer. God calls us to a sincere search, a journey without masks, where we cannot simply disguise our mistakes or failures. In Jeremiah 29:13, he makes a powerful promise: "You will seek me and find me when you search for me with all your heart." This total surrender is what opens the way to true communion. Imagine the search for God as the act of lighting a candle in a dark room. Every prayer and every attitude of faith illuminates the environment of our soul. God desires to be found, but he expects sincerity and dedication on our part, a search that is a reflection of love, not convenience. Spiritual procrastination is a common trap, where many leave to seek God when they have time. In James 4:8, we are directed, "Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you." This verse reminds us that closeness to God is a choice. When we choose to prioritize our spiritual lives, we plant a harvest of blessings. Who has never had a busy day where they lacked time to pray or meditate? This search doesn't have to be a big event. A simple moment of prayer with an open heart is enough to begin this connection that is strengthened with each act of faith. Moreover, seeking God is not an isolated act, but an ongoing journey. In Psalm 27:8, David expresses his desire, "When you said, 'Seek my face,' my heart said to you, 'Your face, O Lord, I will seek.'" This longing demonstrates a faith that transcends rituals and becomes a relationship. To seek God is above all to know his disposition and his promises, and this is revealed in the small actions of everyday life, in the choices of love and humility we make, which shape us more in the image of Christ, promoting a life of peace and spiritual harvest. The search for God also challenges us to turn away from evil and purify ourselves spiritually. James 1:21 counsels, "Therefore, casting off all filthiness and accumulation of badness, receive with meekness the word implanted in you, which is powerful to save your souls." This is a call to let go of what distances us from God and welcome his presence with a clean heart. The further we move away from selfishness, pride, and temptation, the more we realize the value of this pursuit. This is a journey of renewal where, at every step, the Spirit is strengthened and the peace of God becomes our dwelling place. Selfishness is like a silent trap that closes the heart and prevents genuine connection with God and others. Philippians 2:3 gives us precious advice. "Do nothing out of contention or vainglory, but in humility. Each one considers others better than himself." This verse reveals the contrast between selfishness and true Christian faith, which is centered on love and humility. When pride takes over, our vision becomes limited, focused only on our own interests, and we let go of the compassion and spirit of forgiveness that God teaches us. Cultivating humility is the first step to overcoming this barrier and living in harmony. The Bible teaches that love is the foundation of faith, and it cannot coexist with selfishness. At 1 Corinthians 13:5, Paul describes love, saying that it does not seek its own interests. This kind of love is an invitation to sacrifice, to give up certain desires for the sake of the good of others. Selfishness, on the other hand, stifles this love, leading us away from the principles of Jesus, who demonstrated the purest humility by washing the feet of his disciples and laying down his life. When we act without expecting anything in return, we reflect divine love, planting a harvest of healthy and meaningful relationships. Selfishness also generates a deep emptiness, as it distances us from the divine purpose of living in communion. In Proverbs 11:25, we find a promise: "A generous soul will prosper, and he who listens will also be answered." This verse reminds us that generosity is a source of blessing and spiritual growth. When we focus only on ourselves, we miss the opportunity to be instruments of love in the lives of others. It's the same feeling as keeping a precious gift and never giving it away. True joy comes from sharing, for it is in surrender that we receive double back, and this reflects God's will for his children. The root of selfishness is often pride, a temptation that puts our I above all else. James 4:6 warns us, "God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble." This verse is a reminder that God values a humble heart, willing to serve and put others first. When selfishness dominates, our relationship with God weakens, because he turns away from those who are full of themselves. On the other hand, humility makes room for the Holy Spirit to work in us, leading us to a life of purpose and peace, where love is the center of all our actions. The life of faith is built on sacrificial love and the renunciation of selfishness. Jesus, in Matthew 16:24, invites us to take up our cross and follow him, an expression of surrender that requires giving up our own will in order to live out God's will. This is a daily choice, which transforms our character and strengthens our spirituality. The more we practice generosity and detachment, the more we feel the divine presence. Every act of love we do in God's name is a seed of faith and gratitude that, at the right time, will produce a bountiful harvest of peace and joy in the Spirit. The Bible teaches us an essential truth: what we sow, we reap. Galatians 6:7 expresses this clearly. Do not be deceived, God is not mocked, for whatever a man sows, that he will also reap. This verse alerts us to the responsibility of our actions, showing that every choice has a consequence. When we cultivate the spirit of kindness and faith, our harvest is one of peace and blessings. On the other hand, selfish actions guided by anger or pride end up bringing bitter results. Thus, we are invited to look at our attitudes and reflect on the type of seeds we are planting in our lives. This spiritual law of sowing and reaping is visible in many areas of our lives. At Proverbs 22:8, we read, "He that sows unrighteousness will reap evil." This verse reminds us that a lack of justice and love leads us down a path of loneliness and repentance. Many desire a harvest of peace and love, but they have sown resentment and pride. To reap what we really want, we must start by changing the quality of the seeds. It is like a farmer who wants a good harvest. He knows that he needs to choose the best seeds and take care of the soil to obtain the desired fruits. Just as our actions bring consequences, our thoughts and words are also powerful seeds. In James 3:18 we find a profound teaching. Now the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace to those who exercise peace. As we promote peace, we reap righteousness and spiritual prosperity. It is a cycle of giving back where, as we choose paths of love and compassion, we create an environment of blessing around us. Instead of feeding on complaints and pessimism, the person who sows good words and thoughts finds a harvest of joy and satisfaction. Even in times of difficulty, faith encourages us to continue sowing good. In Ecclesiastes 11:6, the instruction is clear. In the morning sow your seed, and in the evening do not withdraw your hand, for you do not know which will prosper. This verse teaches us about perseverance and the hope that at the right time, the harvest will come. It is a call not to be discouraged, but to continue planting seeds of faith, even when we do not see immediate results. The act of sowing is an exercise in patience and trust in God, who at the right time will bring the fruits of our dedication. By understanding the importance of our choices, we learn that every action can be a seed of love, faith, or forgiveness, which transforms our lives and those around us. In 2 Corinthians 9:6, Paul reminds us, "He who sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and he who sows bountifully will reap bountifully." This is the power of generosity. The more we do good, the more we reap. Thus, every gesture of kindness and every sincere prayer are seeds that, in God's time, will bring an abundant harvest of grace and peace to our journey. Words have immense power, being able to edify or destroy. Proverbs 18:21 teaches an essential truth. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and he who loves it will eat of its fruit. This verse reminds us that our words are not just sound, but seeds that we plant in the lives of others and in our own. What we say can profoundly influence the environment around us. Just as words of encouragement bring hope, words of criticism can bring down. This is an invitation to use the tongue to sow love and encourage others, building a harvest of peace and harmony. Mastering the language is one of the greatest virtues we can develop. James 3:5-6 compares the tongue to a fire, saying, "So also the tongue is a little limb and boasts of great things. See how great a forest burns a small fire." The tongue is also a fire. As a world of iniquity, it is placed among our members and defiles the whole body. This example shows how a misplaced word can spread misunderstanding and hurt. Often a word of anger spoken in the heat of the moment leaves deep marks. Knowing how to control the tongue is a demonstration of wisdom and humility, reflecting a spirit at peace. The words we say to ourselves also have a big impact. In Mark 11:23, Jesus teaches us about the power to declare in faith. "For truly I say to you, whoever says to this mountain, 'Arise and cast yourself into the sea,' and not to doubt in his heart, but to believe that what he says will be done, whatever he says will be done to him." This verse shows us that faith expressed through words can transform reality. What we say about our life and our dreams influences the way we see our possibilities. The more we speak with faith and positivity, the more we are encouraged to take action. It is essential to remember that words not only affect the present, but also the future. At Proverbs 12:18 we read, "There are words that wound like a sword, but the tongue of the wise brings healing." This contrast illustrates the impact that words can have. Instead of hurting, we can choose to speak up, to heal, offering comfort and understanding. Imagine someone going through a difficult time. A word of encouragement can be the first step toward your recovery. We are called to be peacemakers, with the responsibility to use our tongues to plant seeds of hope and edification. Finally, the Bible teaches us to use our words to glorify God. At Colossians 4:6, Paul counsels, "Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, that you may know how you ought to answer each one." This verse is a reminder that our speech should reflect the character of Christ, conveying love, respect, and understanding. Instead of speaking with anger or arrogance, we are called to edify. May every word that comes out of our mouths be an opportunity to promote peace and love, producing a rich and abundant spiritual harvest in our lives and in the lives of others. Taking care of what we allow into our lives is an essential practice for keeping a spirit aligned with God's will. In Deuteronomy 7:25-26, God guides us on the importance of avoiding negative spiritual influences. "The graven images of their gods you shall burn with fire. The silver and gold that are on them you shall not covet. Therefore thou shalt not put an abomination into thy house, lest thou be cursed." This verse is a powerful reminder that objects and practices that are contrary to faith can impact the spiritual environment. We are encouraged to cleanse our homes and our minds of any influence that might open doors to harmful energies. This practice of caution goes beyond physical objects. It also involves the influences on our daily choices and relationships. In 1 Corinthians 15:33, Paul warns us, Do not be deceived, bad company corrupts good morals. Often, negative influence can come from friendships or environments that do not reflect healthy spiritual values. This does not mean withdrawing from everyone, but discerning with whom and where we invest our time and energy. By building relationships based on love, faith, and respect, we create a circle of support and protection which strengthens our spirit and keeps us away from temptations. Care for spiritual influences also includes the thoughts and information we consume. In Philippians 4:8, Paul gives us counsel on what we should focus on. Whatever is true, whatever is honest, whatever is right, think on this. This verse encourages us to choose what we feed into our minds, knowing that what we think influences our actions. Keeping thoughts aligned with truth and faith allows us to develop a strong and resilient spirit, immune to temptations and influences that can lead us astray from divine purpose. Many people are surprised to realize how small objects or practices can influence the spiritual environment of their homes. In Joshua 24:15, we find a firm call, "Choose ye this day whom ye shall serve. I and my house will serve the Lord." By dedicating our home and life to God, we are deciding on a harvest of peace and harmony, avoiding influences that could hinder this journey. This daily commitment transforms the home into a sanctuary of faith and prayer, where God's presence is constantly felt, creating an environment that strengthens the family spiritually. Finally, taking care of spiritual influences is a practice that protects the heart and brings us closer to God. At Proverbs 4:23 we read, "Above all things that are to be guarded, guard your heart, for out of it come the goings out of life." This instruction reminds us that the heart is the source of our actions and must be jealously guarded. When we avoid negative influences and seek divine presence, we are planting a harvest of love and peace, which is reflected in every aspect of our lives. This daily care is a fundamental step towards a full and protected walk of faith. The Bible warns us about the importance of being vigilant against the temptations and snares of the enemy. In 1 Peter 5:8, we have a clear warning, "Be sober, watch, for your adversary the devil walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour." This verse reminds us that the enemy always looks for a point of weakness to attack. Temptation is a common form of attack, and every Christian is called to resist with strength and faith. Vigilance is not just an act of caution, but a practice of prayer and reading the Word, which strengthens the spirit and keeps us ready to face the snares of evil. Resistance to temptation is something Jesus knows well, for he was also tempted. In Matthew 4:1-11, we see how Jesus overcame temptation in the wilderness using God's Word. Every answer he gave to the tempter was based on Scripture, showing us the importance of knowing the Word in order to be strong. When we are faced with temptations of pride, anger, or any other desire that leads us away from God, we can do the same, turning to the Bible as a shield. Prayer and constant study of the Word are powerful tools that keep us grounded and help us discern the wiles of the enemy. In addition to the Word, prayer is essential to keep away from temptations. In Matthew 26:41, Jesus instructs, "Watch and pray lest you enter into temptation. Indeed, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." Temptation reminds us of our vulnerability, but prayer connects us with divine strength. When we maintain an active prayer life, we are creating a spiritual stronghold that prevents temptations from setting in. The practice of continual prayer strengthens the spirit, keeping us vigilant and ready to resist, even when the flesh feels the weight of desire. Knowing how to resist temptation is also an act of humility and dependence on God. James 4:7 teaches us, "Submit yourselves therefore to God, resist the devil and he will flee from you." This verse reveals that resistance to evil begins with submission to God. By acknowledging our dependence on God, we allow his strength to guide us. This humility is the opposite of pride, and it is just that which fortifies the spirit against temptations. When we surrender our struggles to the Lord and seek his help, the enemy is forced to retreat, for he knows that divine protection is all around us. Finally, living in resistance to evil is a daily choice. which allows us to reap a life of peace and spiritual victory. In Ephesians 6:11, Paul counsels us, "Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil." This is the call to be prepared, equipped with faith, word, and prayer, like a soldier preparing for battle. As we put on the spiritual armor, we are ready to face each challenge with courage and confidence, knowing that God is on our side and that with Him, we are more than conquerors. Now that you know these biblical warnings, the big question is, what are you going to do with this knowledge? Perhaps you have realized how small changes can transform your life. Whether in the words you use, in your choices, or in your spiritual journey, but it's no use knowing and not acting. Are you ready to cultivate faith with purpose? Ready to use your words as seeds of love and not conflict? And are you willing to listen to the warnings that we often ignore? Life is short, and every moment can be an opportunity to build something greater with God. What if I told you that applying these teachings is the way to a bountiful harvest of peace and joy? Don't miss the chance to live in harmony with what He has planned for you. If this message touched you in any way, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and follow our upcoming content. Let's keep learning and growing together on a journey of faith, transformation, and victory.